Justin, thank you so much for joining specifically AI CX podcast here, where we really dive into customer experience across all different types of merchants in the ecosystem, and sometimes specifically Shopify stores. So, welcome, Justin. Justin comes from drinks.com. And maybe let's just start there, Justin. Well, before we get into you, can you give us a little insight into what is drinks.com?
Yeah, sure. So I'm glad to be here. Nice to meet you, Brian. So Drinks, at its root, we power digital commerce for the $285 billion U.S. alcohol industry. And so, what that means is we essentially build alcohol tech, regulation, compliance, logistics, fulfillment type technology. Think about the complexities in there to make it easy for all different types of merchants to sell alcohol online. And so, at its root, just real simply, there's a Shopify ecosystem, which we have an app in to enable all merchants that are on Shopify to be able to sell safely, sanely, compliantly alcohol, as well as we have a wine as a service sort of API stack for enterprise clients.
And is that, sorry, I'm just going to dive right in. Is that like where you started? And I know that actually for our audience, Justin is, and congrats, a new CTO of the company. It's been a couple of months?
Yeah, right? Yeah. So I'm very new. I would say it's right around, 6 to 8 weeks or so since I've joined.
All right. So I will test you on this. So I was going to ask, previously, it didn't start as a Shopify app, correct? Like it started as more of an API driven.
Yeah. Drinks has been around for a while. So over a decade, in fact. So it started out in the DTC space and really with one of our main properties of Wine Insiders. And so the company at that point was building the technology to be able to do large scale DTC, taking alcohol and safely, compliantly be able to ship it across the United States. And so building that platform and that business over the years just helped all of the people in the company get really, really, really good at understanding the alcohol businesses and all the nuances, the complexities of it. And alcohol is a little different than most product categories out there just because it's very antiquated. And the laws and regulations stem from basically the Prohibition time. And so, think about a category that has a huge barrier to entry and sort of a deliberate barrier to entry, if you will. I mean,
Sure.
It came out of there. It's the only product type to be named in the Constitution. So if that gives you any sort of insight into the amount of complexities related to it. So Drinks started in that space. And then use that positioning and just, being able to, for the company's own purposes, handle the compliance aspects, navigating the regulatory landscape, as well as just the complex sort of like tax regime that's in place and understanding how to do that. And then understanding how to do that, on the internet safely.
Let me stop you really quick because you were talking about barrier to entry. And just for clarification from my standpoint, when you talk about barrier to entry, it's almost twofold, right? Because there's one, which is the classic barrier to entry of just even if you're opening up a retail store, it'll be very difficult to do that. And then there's the barrier to entry of becoming or going online as well too. Are you talking about both specifically when you talk about barrier to entries?
Yeah. There's multi layers of the barrier to entry, but if you think about just what it would take it's pretty well known that the complexity of building out an e-commerce shop of any sort. If you're going to sell some sort of widgets, if you're going to open up a t-shirt store and want to be successful, everything related to your supply chain, logistics, the entire fulfillment, order management, processing, your financial piece of it, collecting the right taxes and the payment engines, just all of that combined with top of funnel type stuff. So now imagine if before something like a Drinks came along, now you've got to navigate figuring out how to get alcohol licensing, how to be able to sell it online, which is a whole other factor. And then something like, selling from one state to another. Yes. And then every piece of regulatory line item that's going to hit you. Like how you do money movement, how you do the simple stuff like things you can display on the website versus things that you have to have, 21 and over adult signatures for signing for alcohol when it lands. You have to make sure that the regulations of where you're shipping from to where it's going are taken into account. And it could go down to sort of like at the product SKU level of differences. And so that would be like one aspect of it. Then you have the taxing and the money side of it, which is super complex. Every type of, or every state has its own taxes, and then it goes deeper than that when you've got every license type might have different tax regulations in place. So just being able to check out in an e-commerce standard shopping cart is just not viable, right? And then you have to make sure that you're getting date of birth and things like that. That just
Yeah.
aren't. It's not in the normal flow of e-commerce. So traditionally, you would have to go and build just an infinite amount of solutions and products to be able to do that safe and sane and compliantly. And then the other factor that I'll mention is the way in which alcohol is handled in the United States is a strict 3-tiered system. And so in each of those tiers, whether you're a producer, a distributor, or a retailer, each of those tiers will have a lot of rules related to them specifically. So if you think about like an Amazon who now owns grocery stores that sell alcohol.
Yes.
So now they're in a different category because they have to deal with alcohol. So that there's things that they can do and can't do now. And you have to take all of that into consideration if you're if you have that thought of how do I sell alcohol on the internet, right? It turns into it turns into almost enough red tape to prevent you from being able to do it.
But is it, I'll ask one more question because I think we can go deeper into this later in the segment, but is it that if you solve this for one brand, you can then take the learnings from that one brand and then use those same learnings to then like follow every other brand that's coming in the drinks? Is that kind of how you figured it out, or is every brand different when it comes to the regulation? Well, you even talked about different states are different, right?
Yeah, it's the idea or the goal would be to ensure everything we're building in the drinks platform and the offering, we get many uses out of it, right? So.
Yeah.
But it's not as simple as sort of one size fits all.
Okay. Yeah, that was my question. If it was one size fits all for a brand,
we're building it to feel like that. So if you're a merchant, whether you're a retailer like Sam's Club or Macy's or Thrive Market or the ones that we have on our platform,
sure,
or a marketplace, a sort of Instacart style marketplace, or whether you're an alcohol producer, one of the 50,000 wineries and alcohol companies in the US, you're going to fall in a different category of problem space. And we try to make sure that our solutions and our offerings just remove all the complexity of that. And it's easy as partner with drinks, get on the app, and our solution will make sure that you're doing this compliantly, safely, and maximizing sort of the e-commerce like top side of it for your brand or your company, regardless of what type it is.
Okay. Well, we're going to get into that in a couple of minutes, and although we already got into it, but I have so many questions that you've already brought up. Like one is like I want to know what's the alternative to drinks right now, in your opinion, if drinks wasn't there. But before I get into that, like again, 3 months in, Justin, congrats again. I find your journey to drinks rather interesting as well too. Do you mind kind of sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So when I first heard of drinks, I immediately felt like this feels like it's the right place. Like before I even really dove into it, just from the fit of my background. But I'll give you the quick trajectory. Started out in the Marine Corps, ended up in sort of like early version of tech in the mid 90s. Laptops were green and metal and weighed 100 pounds. And spent a fair amount of time. I would classify like all the places that I've been have been, hardcore technology with a e-commerce layer on it,
Okay.
with a regulation or compliance or security lens on it as well. So in the Marine Corps, I was doing a lot of crypto work and just doing a lot of secure messaging type stuff. So think about, launch coordinates, and that can't go over the internet type thing. And so left left there, went into the commercial world, went to a big real estate company. So spent a fair amount of time working on platforms that were pretty regulated as well, right? If you think about just providing, it was National Realty Trust. It was a big conglomeration of owning a lot of
Sure.
real estate offices. But just something as simple as making sure an escrow closes on time and all the systems and all the dollars and I's are dotted and T's are crossed on that. Extremely sort of important. And, it's one of those where uptime is critical, milliseconds matter, but being accurate also matters, and following the law actually matters. So went to a SaaS company called B3. We did essentially e-commerce before e-commerce was actually like branded as such. We were doing private label shopping carts and credit card processing for Bank of America and Wells Fargo merchants.
Oh, wow.
It was like Shopify meets Stripe before any of those were even talked about in the early days. So I spent a lot of time there doing the first iteration of sort of PCI and all the the credit card type of compliance stuff. So got pretty familiar in that space.
Okay.
Anyways, left there, went to another e-commerce company. Just spent a fair amount of time in the e-commerce world. Ultimately landed at Ticketmaster. Spent 4 years there. I sort of got to see anything and everything there. Just one of the, I feel like one of the world's largest, most well-known type companies with really challenging problems. Everything from ticketing at scale, combined with the e-commerce component of it, combined with large-scale payments, and just getting that across all industries. Left there, went to Weedmaps. Weedmaps, I would say, is the closest to drinks. So spent the last 4 years as CTO at Weedmaps, essentially building out, and I hate to use exactly the same phrases, but we're using the same phrases, the operating system for cannabis. So if you go back 5 years or so, cannabis was pretty high and to the right in terms of like the social conscious of the US. It was in the political hemisphere and on the debate stage and all that. And so basically taking and not only just normalizing, but normalizing the e-commerce and marketplace aspects of that, and building an entire SaaS portfolio of products around it. Anything and everything you can think of that would be in a highly regulated world is fairly, I don't want to say identical, but very, very, very similar.
Right.
Producers, cultivators, distributors, retailers. You have state by state regulations that none of them match, that you have to take into consideration when you're trying to put stuff on for sale.
Right.
And so spent 4 years there, built a product catalog of like 20 products. We IPO'd it and decided to leave there. Just that, the state of cannabis is in a little bit of trouble at the moment. So hopefully things get shaken out there a little better. But then that cuts to drinks. So taking that as the backdrop of dealing with highly regulated products, dealing with e-commerce at scale, and drinks was extremely interesting because it's exactly the same problem space, yet a really interesting and exciting industry that has real revenue that you can actually interact with. And so in the cannabis space, there's a ton of revenue and a ton of sales and all that, but it's really hard because at the federal level, it's still illegal. So you can't get institutional money, and it's hard to do online payments and things like that. Whereas alcohol, you have a $285 billion industry that's 100 years old, tried and true practices that are in place, that is not only growing, it's also growing and trending for more online sales, but it's also extremely antiquated and fragmented, and there's a lot of things that make it a little bit behind the times, and so it's ripe for technical disruption, if you will. Disruption is probably not the right word, but basically trying to figure out how to demystify this industry and make it easier for most shops to participate. And so that's where drinks and the core of it play is just basically with a goal of enabling alcohol sales for all merchants, not just the current incumbent players. So it's got a strict 3-tier system, right? Producers, distributors, retailers. So if you don't have a license and play in that governed world, it's extremely hard for you to enter that space. So what we've done is we've built technology behind the scenes with our learnings over the course of a decade dealing with large scale alcohol sales via our DTC world. And so we built the platform to make it easy for anyone to sell alcohol. So we call it the 4th tier. So if you think in that tier,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
the 4th tier would be like a Thrive Market, for instance, right? And so Thrive Market sells groceries online, but they don't have the desire to become an alcohol company and all the red tape that requires. If you think about like just e-commerce in general, most companies don't want to do credit card processing and payments themselves.
It's a brand new business. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you've got the scrutiny of everything in that world, right? So you just outsource it and have somebody else handle it. So we try to do that for everyone in the 4th, our clients that are in the alcohol space, as well as the ones that want to get in it, to basically say, we want you to handle the complexity of getting us in the space. All we want to do is add alcohol as a category to our e-commerce website. So like Thrive Market now goes from a grocery store, online grocery store, to a full service grocery store that has beverage alcohol on it, and overnight opens up an entire business line for them with insanely high margin products that alcohol represents. And for them, it's not a lot more than just doing integration, integrating it in, using the Drinks app, using our platform and our tools. And to the consumer, all of a sudden now their store is opened up to be able to add alcohol to cart.
And is that the biggest opportunity you see, Justin? Like with drinks, where it's that 4th tier, like expanding a store that already sells XYZ and now they can sell alcohol? Is that probably the biggest opportunity, or are there other big opportunities for drinks?
I see that one as being a massive one. So if you think about, and it dovetails into our strategic partnership with Shopify. And so for us, if you think, well known, but Shopify being sort of the world's largest, most robust, lucrative sort e-com platform. So millions of stores on Shopify. Now imagine you go to the Shopify app store and you just, I want to be in, get on drinks, and now you can open up and start adding alcohol SKUs to your store. That the opportunity is just massive for that, right? So opening up the world to be able to participate in alcohol sales in a safe, sane, compliant, easy way is huge opportunity. Combine that with our AI tech that we've invested in over the years, and being able to look at the world of alcohol and the SKUs, and just from a decade of being positioned where we're seeing online orders and being in the flow of data, being able to take that data and the product catalog and all the attributes that you can imagine we've amassed over time about alcohol, the products, the performance of them, and then start to marry that with what the consumers of those stores may be likely to purchase. So if you're a let's say, give you this example because it kind of highlights. So imagine if you're a pet store and you want to add alcohol. So you already have millions of users coming into your pet's online store, and now we can look at that and so you can add the category on there. And obviously there's the heavy lifting is going to be how to handle payments, how to handle compliance, how to handle fulfillment. And so
which is all what Drinks does.
Yeah, we try to abstract all of that away. But then some of the magic that I think in the AI tech that we've built is going to be ensuring that we're putting the highest ROI products in front of the consumers. So if you're purchasing I don't, a bunch of things that tell me you're into schnauzers and you've got these schnauzers or whatever. I'm sure somewhere in the planet there's some schnauzer based wine that immediately is in a carousel and upselling, right? Like, and
Sure.
so if you think about the opportunity of um, the likelihood that the audience is going to be open to buying alcohol product is wide, as evident by the $285 billion market. And so, and it's just an easy upsell for a lot of
Sure.
almost every merchant, right? And then if you get the branding right because of leveraging the tech behind the scenes, now it kind of takes the heavy lifting off of the merchant as well. Sort of like an easy button, put the best products on here for me. I don't want to worry about it.
So then let me ask then the so you brought up the AI component of it. When I think about the AI component of what you're talking about, like there's the learning part of the data that it's learning from. So are you telling me that the anyone that is on the drinks marketplace, like that's how drinks is learning about what they're buying, and who's buying that? Or there's also components and data outside of drinks that you're also having your AI learn
Yeah,
a lot about there as well too.
yeah.
I'm and I'm coming from that the trousers or the dog idea that you say, like, are you pulling that idea from like inside drinks, like, oh, we've
yeah,
seen this before, or is it
yes,
pulling from a wide variety of data sources?
yeah. So I guess the most accurate answer is anything and everything, and especially as we continue to mature that space. But being in the alcohol space for the last decade, where positioned where we're at, we have a tremendous amount of data, right? So we can look at us, and so our AI tech that we've patented um, some AI tech we called Pair, and so what Pair is, it starts from the, let's call it the SKU side of things. So if you take, and I can just walk through it real quick because it's
I'd love to.
fairly interesting. So a couple different products that we have in the Pair suite would be a drinks recommend, like a recommendation engine, right?
Okay.
So that recommendation engine would look at the products themselves. We know this SKU, we know this particular bottle of wine, we know every attribute about it, and we've seen it across a vast amount of different retailers in a bunch of different settings, and we've collected more and more and more attributes and have an understanding of that particular bottle of wine in a lot of depth. And so one of the or some of our AI models and tech that we built is one called Label AI. And so our Label AI is us basically using computer vision type technologies and modeling where we're looking at labels, we're looking at the imagery of it, understanding here's the bottle shape, here's the label shape, color palettes, is anything and everything we can glean from the label itself,
Yeah.
and then classifying that and trying to take that in context of every written word on the bottle and the label, and then trying to extract semantic representation of what are the words telling us about this in terms of the brand, the wine name, the color, the style, any notes that come along with it. Then we have a wine AI classification type engine. And so what that does is it really tries to learn a hierarchical way to model a wine. So that's everything from this is a still, not a sparkling. This is a red. This is a Pinot Noir. This is an oaky and maybe some citrus notes, and then starts to classify that, score that all up and everything, right? And so then we have another modeling called the perception AI, where we're taking everything we've learned from the label itself, the color palettes and everything, and determining, is this a cheerful label? Is this an original sort of like classy OG, expensive bottle you would see in a French restaurant somewhere that's going to cost $1,000? Is this a romantic bottle? Is it a fun bottle? So then we have this perception context, right? And so then we try to take all these models and then bake in basically what we think, how do we classify that particular wine in all of those different contexts combined with now combine it to the context of what is being asked of us from the front end side, right? You could take
Yeah.
in behavioral data, clickstream data, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And then you take a decade of rich order history and propensities of like, this wine normally shows up in this blah, blah, blah type of order. You know, customers always also bought, like those kind of models. And eventually you get like a really rich, robust 360 view of not only the alcohol product and all the attributes that you can get from a label, but you know, all the AI stuff from the label itself.
Yeah.
Then you add it to the traditional sort of e-com world and all the AI pieces that you can kind of get from a shopping world, and combine that
Right.
all together.
Return visitors, like what else they've
Yeah,
purchased.
exactly.
Oh
So
my gosh.
that's kind of like in a nutshell of what we've
In a
built.
nutshell, too. Well, hold on.
Nutshell
So I'm going to ask a marketing question that I think you would have an answer to. But what I think about when you're talking about all of this is that I think what's known is the retail side of buying alcohol or wine. And you mentioned this, and I think you mentioned this on the notes too to me, or maybe I found this on the drinks website. But in person, it was between 70 and 80% of users. Of purchasers like purchased a bottle of wine just based on the label, right?
Yeah.
And so if that's kind of proven in the retail in person space, do you believe that that also is already proven when it comes to the online space, or is that still an hypothesis that's out there? And we really, or maybe you have a hypothesis yourself of actually what are the variables of someone that's online that can't touch something or can't really see what color that is and making that purchase?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the same. Meaning, so if you think about what they're going to see online is first we need some signals, right? Like just they're gonna click around, they're gonna add to a, you know, they're gonna click into a category. Oh, you know, obviously they're in an L2, L3 category of Pinot Noirs or whatever, and then based on that, you know, that's enough to start signaling, you know, the data in which we already have. But then once they maybe add something to cart, now you can kind of really look at like, oh, they added this particular cab. What do we know about that particular cab? We know it's bold, we know it's oaky, we know it's blah blah blah. We know all these attributes, plus we know that it's, you know, the perception component of it. Oh, we found this one to be a romantic style. Okay, so you take all the attributes that are out there, that we kind of already know from an e-com world, add in the sort of, let's call it product catalog attributes. So it could be, you know, 50 different attributes of the product catalog, and then you take the perception piece. Now we can add something that sits right there and hits them with a carousel with bottles that visually appeal to exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit similar to the in-store. The in-store is a little different because you're walking in and you're just seeing a wall of wine. And it's like, oh goodness. And so first you've got to hone into where's my price point, and I like cabs, and now you're just looking at a whole wall. Whereas the online experience, we can get it really tight and crisp and just put the ones right in front of you that you're most likely to interact with. And so we've seen we've done a comparison in numbers compared to that modeling versus a randomized baseline, and saw 200% increase of likely to add to cart. And so we know that it works. And so, you know, and so we have now, you know, I think as the online side continues to scale and mature, we'll be able to just get more and more information, more details, more attributes. And so it should just continue to improve that model. Whereas, you know, I go back to drinks is in a unique position because we spent a decade already in the business selling millions of bottles of alcohol. So we have a 10-year head start on building out some of these models that now with generative AI type tools, we're not starting from scratch. We're using those tools to fine tune what we want to happen.
Right.
Help make this really bad. And just like any other industry, just the exact same in cannabis was one of the big challenges is there's usually no such thing as a universal master product catalog that has every SKU with really amazing data that you can pull from to put things and merchandise them online. It's never exists, right? And so part of the art is being able to take a minimum amount of data from a merchant's product and using these tools to build out and infer everything we need to have high confidence that we've created. We've taken a zero description type of a product and created 100 attribute of detailed descriptions of that particular alcohol product.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're using a lot of the tooling for now, is to just help refine those pipelines, make them better. And obviously we're in the same space as everyone else is the tools themselves are evolving. So it's not a set it and forget it. It's set it and, test, A/B test, infinitely as a continual process in our.
Well, for someone that, I will say, for someone that is not in the technology and even e-commerce industry, I'm just kind of putting myself in their perspective, to know what actually goes on behind the scenes to get someone to press that button to put a bottle of alcohol into their cart is outrageous. But this happens everywhere. And I honestly want to be truthful with you, where it's like, God, it is a hard problem to solve compared to at least my mindset, because I've been in the software space as well too. And it's like, well, with software, you can try it out for yourself. And if you like it, go ahead, you can buy it. Or even if you think about, I don't know, like shoes and AR now, it's like, okay, there's some sort of ability to like kind of try something out or test something out somehow in order to see if you do like it. But when it comes to alcohol, unless like there's no like here you can take a little test drive here and decide for yourself if you like it or not, or then bottle the thing. It's like, no, it's a $25, $50, $100 decision right now on the spot, and that goes to show that how important that algorithm that you're running is.
It's very, very subjective of a product.
Sure.
And by design, alcohol producer wants to get as much sales as possible, right? If you think about the large scale celebrity brands and things like that, right? It's I think at some level it might be there, and then there's different consumers types, right?
Yeah.
And, enthusiasts and people who are the same people who are writing tasting notes are probably going to pay attention to those attributes a lot more. So I like, like I said, the one part of our model is that that semantic engine where it's trying to understand and infer, is this oaky? Is this smoked? Is there smoky flavors in there? Is this, and just really trying to, or is it citrusy, right? Like, so maybe on a label or maybe on a description somewhere, someone mentions, I don't know, peach and apricot flavors or pineapple flavors or something. We can sort of infer that fruit and or citrusy, and then you can go on, you can kind of match that based on that person's taste.
Yeah.
Whereas there might be another consumer who really is more driven by the label itself.
Yep.
And sort of just, does this look and feel on brand for what I typically buy?
So let me ask you, Justin, like, if I wanted to, it's crazy because like there's been so much recent technology development in AI just in the last 6 months or so, but I do want to look at like the just like what's coming in the next year for drinks. And the reason why I say that is because it sounds to me like you've solved some of the issue. It's almost like you have all the data available to you, not all the data, but you have a ton of different data sets now available to you in drinks. And now it's about like, okay, how can we understand this data a little bit better to get the right drink in front of you? What comes next after this? Like, what are you thinking about in 6 months? I guess if I were to summarize this, it's like, gosh, it's a data problem right now in terms of just like, okay, we've got all this data. How do we bring it together and understand it a little bit better to give the best recommendation or so forth? So then once that's put in place, and I'm not saying that's easy at all, it's probably extremely difficult, but like, what are you thinking about in 6 months or 12 months, if you don't mind me asking?
The way I sort of think about it is really expanding the offering at every level. And so building out that fourth tier and really getting um, nationwide traction on it.
Hmm.
And there's a bunch of different like things in there that are important. One is awareness, meaning most people have never heard of this concept or don't think this is possible, right?
Well, the awareness of just selling alcohol, or the awareness of there's a provider that can help you sell it.
Right, but both.
Both.
Because it's been, we've been conditioned for 100 years of it's just not possible,
Right.
unless you're going to craft brew some beer and like that's your interest, or make some wine. If you're not going to go that route, you just don't really think that that's a viable thing. It's not top of mind. But imagine if Shopify releasing Collective. Now imagine if you can go into Collective in that type of marketplace and just say, I want to start selling alcohol SKUs.
Right.
And just adding SKUs to your existing store, like those types of things, and just really normalizing the execution side of how that's done for e-commerce. So it doesn't even matter what industry you're in, right? But any sort of an e-commerce store, just getting broad awareness, and with that, obviously for us, building out anything and everything that it takes to continue to make sure that is almost point and click as possible, and so expanding our network, expanding I always call it a digital supply chain, all of our integrations, whether it's warehouses and logistics centers and all that, just making sure that we have total coverage on all of that, and expanding as we're growing our client base and our merchant base, on both sides of it, or actually like I would call it three different areas, although they kind of play in the same platform. But we've got like the Shopify ecosystem, the drinks app there, and expanding that, like I just mentioned, expanding the fourth tier to capture every one of them. If you're selling something, you might as well sell alcohol, super high margin product.
Sorry, Justin, I want to just stop you really quick, because maybe this is news for me, but I want to make sure I clarify for the audience here too. A distribution as well too is handled by Drinks, and you work with third-party partners.
Yeah, we work with partners, so to make sure that we can route your, let's just call it orders, even though there's a lot more going on. We want to route your orders to the right licensees, to the right 3PL warehousing for shipment and fulfillment and tracking and all that. So we broker building out that solution, and so it's a full stop solution. So
if I'm Thrive Market, I don't even have to. I don't have to pick out what I want to sell. Like
right.
Drinks can take care of that for me.
Correct. So there's obviously different client types that we have. Some want more control, where, I give you an example, a recent integration that we've did with Imperfect Foods and Misfit Markets.
Yes.
And so obviously they're going to want to make sure that what they're selling in their wine category is, number one, now they're selling wine. Like that is from a business perspective, now we have an entire business line we just opened up overnight. Happens to be a very high margin category, which is awesome. So now they can offer wines, but they want to make sure those wines match their brand. And so, they work with us to make sure that, we have the ability to either curate and end to end make sure that we have a highly curated selection of SKUs that they had a part in selecting. And that everything from the fulfillment, warehousing, and all that, versus, so that's one where it needs to be on brand, and there's a lot more. It's higher touch, because now there's a lot more parts and things in play, versus having available SKUs that are available inventory across all the different areas of our supply chain that could be available for anyone in the fourth tier to sell without having to worry about any of that. And so that's why I kind of mentioned like the Shopify Collective, because
Can you actually define that for our audience really quick, for those that don't know Shopify Collective?
They recently announced it in their last sessions. And so basically what it is, it's a marketplace that they have in place so that you can, as a retailer of whatever you sell, now you have access to anyone else's inventory that they wanted to put available for sale by any other merchant. And so then Shopify brokers the moving money and all the complexities of that actually happening. So they launched it in context with their Drake store.
Yeah.
And so, everyone wants to buy Drake's shoes and his ping pong racket and whatever he's got. So now he has a website, basically all third-party products that are just on different Shopify stores, but it's getting sold through the Drake store.
Yeah.
And so so it's making SKUs available.
It's amazing.
For sale. Yeah. So if you think about now
for entrepreneurs, yeah, I just think about the mom and pop, let's say the mom and pop, they're in Napa Valley, have a super, super small store, and they hear about drinks, right? And they're like, oh, we could put this online. All of a sudden they have the ability to see their product in Macy's, right? Macy's is an example, or Macy's is one of your customers. God, that the scale of that is unbelievable with technology.
It is, it goes back to the why I joined the company. When I looked at us having a patented AI system in place with the pair stuff and everything that entails, combined with the opportunity of the fourth tier, basically democratizing alcohol sales for the entire United States, whether you're in alcohol or not. Those numbers are staggering to think about, and the opportunity is it's almost overwhelming and breaks your brain. How do you put 2 million stores and just start selling alcohol?
Well, it's we're coming to the end here, but it's funny. I'm going full circle because I didn't realize this in the beginning, and I guess this is why we have the podcast. But you're a marketplace, right? You are your own marketplace a little bit because you're probably on a marketing side focused on the like I said, the mom and pops are bringing anyone that's offline to online. But then if you can get more of the Thrive marketplace, so then has more collection to sell to them, you have to focus on both at the same time, correct?
Yeah, we really focus on all tiers. We're powering marketplaces, and we're with the collective style, like I'd mentioned, the B2B sort of brokering of SKUs, combined with the Instacarts of the world that want to add those alcohol components to their marketplace. So we have that going, as well as playing at the big major retailer world, and just adding their either like Macy's, for example, where why not add a wine category or an alcohol category to Macy's, a well-known brand, and then make sure the wine's in there on brand. And so there's that route. And then there's the alcohol companies themselves. If you think about the thousands and thousands and thousands of producers, wineries, distilleries, they don't really have a good way for e-com right now. It's, to build all this would be hard. So generally what we'll do is, a winery would partner with us and then use Drinks app in Shopify, and they would build, we would, a typical, and this goes back to our electric acquisition.
Yes. So, I'm just about to mention that.
That one was a little bit new when I joined. I was like, wait a minute, we bought an agency? But in thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense because now we have it was a strategic acquisition where we have an agency who is fluent in building out full-scale e-commerce stores inside of Shopify and having a lot of depth in that ecosystem, right?
Right.
So there's probably, let's call it the top 50 apps in the ecosystem. Everything from the Klaviyo's of the world to building an e-commerce store. You have to take into account every piece of it: top of funnel, mid funnel, post checkout, all of those aspects. So having a team that can take, let's just say a Macy's, and build that whole e-commerce store in Shopify at a enterprise grade, and then also using the Drinks tooling and software and platform to then add the alcohol components to that. We can be basically a white glove service.
Sure.
Full stop. Just build out your. I want to sell alcohol. Great. we have that ability. Versus having to deal with the client themselves having to learn e-commerce. So if you're a winery, you don't want to have to learn e-commerce. It's hard. And
Well, sorry, let me just say that it also puts it takes the pressure off of, and again, I might be completely wrong here, but I'm just trying to throw some things out there. It takes the pressure out of drinks because we were just talking about the buying process, and there are so many steps in that buying process. Like, 'cause I can imagine if it were me, it's like, well, are there reviews for this bottle of wine? Is there a star? Like, if I wanted to chat with someone really quickly, if I had a question about this type of wine, and then you have to rely on those third-party apps to come in to like, all right, can we integrate that really well? So then everyone is always optimized towards that.
yeah,
Yep, getting that into the cart. And so yeah, it takes the pressure out of drinks because then it's like, okay, we have these other apps involved to really excel and accelerate the buying process here. That
yeah,
obviously apps is creating the platform for.
absolutely. And we're actively doing more and more integrations with players that play in the e-commerce space in Shopify. So
Yeah,
rather than just having a generic ability to use one of those, whatever it is, whether it's a retargeting thing, whether it's an
yep,
SMS campaign, whatever. But now imagine if we partner with them with direct API communications, now we can do things either more efficient or just at a level of depth that you can't get from just
yeah,
a vanilla shop. And
yep.
so yeah, we're excited about the Shopify ecosystem and continuing to build out in there just because it's vast. It's
There's endless possibilities.
right.
Well, I think like we could probably discuss this for maybe another hour, honestly, Justin. I
Right.
really enjoyed the time together. But at what, like 40 minutes now, maybe it's time to stop here. But I'd love to have you back on, honestly. And I'm not just saying that because I think that drinks is fascinating to me, and I hope to our audience. But because, like like I said, there's so many different avenues for you to look at in the business. Again, from the tier fours, like you said, just bringing on normal in person wineries to online is just one aspect of it, and then the AI technology. I could probably go on and on, but you've taught me a lot in this. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Definitely, I'd love to come back. I'm maybe after I get a couple more months under my belt.
I'll give you one more month. How about that? But no, plenty. I mean, it goes to say. Actually, I wanted to ask one more question because this was top of mind, and then we went right into drinks. But you mentioned, and I'm sorry for going all the way back, but I have to ask this. Like you mentioned, like the intersection. This is maybe more of a career question, but you talked about like, okay, e-commerce. You were always diving into e-commerce. You had technology, and there was always this security as well element to the picture. Did you notice? Did you kind of map all those out before kind of coming into drinks, or was it always like you always knew that? Say like at Ticketmaster, almost is that, hey, this is my cup of tea.
Yeah, I think what I've always tried to do is make sure that when I join a company, that technology is core to what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then if I have a sub bullet of that,
Being the CTO, I think that's probably important for you.
yeah, not just core, but sort of, do we have an opportunity? Obviously looking at the opportunity size, the total TAM that we could possibly, do in that industry.
Yeah.
But I've always gravitated towards either high traffic sort of website type companies, but like where milliseconds matter. That's always been my space. Like, Ticketmaster, one of the top 5 at the time, the top 5 trafficked website. We would just get hammered with a billion requests at once, right? To try to resell those Bruno Mars tickets for 50 times what they sold for. And so the complexity of dealing with that and the real time and, just 5.9 expectations combined with the, the complexity of the tech itself, I think motivated me. And so, I've always gravitated towards those types of shops, and typically those types of shops are large e-commerce shops.
Yeah.
And then I sort of found I don't want to say it's a niche, but I felt very comfortable in the highly regulated space or highly secure space.
Yeah.
And it just adds another layer of, I would say, when you do it right, you kind of are able to block out the competition and you don't get lost in the fray as a company where
there's a moat aspect to that.
Yeah. And it's not a race to the bottom, right?
Right.
And so I try to make sure that and I feel like for me in my career, like the ROI makes sense to stay in that space.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you use that as leverage.
Yeah. And then
I had to ask, yeah, I had to ask that, Justin, just because like it was super interesting to see. Because to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense to go from weed maps to something like drinks. And you talked about Ticketmaster before, and I saw it, and I was like, did you like you? It's almost like you planned it out, but it goes to the Steve Jobs quote of like you can only connect the dots looking backwards, not
yeah,
forwards. And
yeah,
so I had to
exactly.
ask you about that.
I like selling things to people that are passionate about buying them, and but with that
Makes things a
passion,
little easier.
it makes it easy because they buy a lot and there's a lot of consumers, but it makes it hard because they're very discerning of what they want. And so
Yes. Yes.
whether it's
Well,
concerts or festivals or a vape
right.
versus what type of flower you like versus
Right.
the vast world of alcohol.
In this instance, AI is definitely an accelerator there that can really help out drinks. But again, like Justin, thank you so much for your time, and we'll try to catch up with you in a few months and see how it's going at drinks.
Awesome. I appreciate the time and thank you so much.